Good afternoon, everybody. It's your boy, Pigskin Pete. Happy Veterans Day to everybody, and happy Monday to everybody, too. If you're a veteran, listen, if you're a current military member, a former military member, whatever it is, if you have family members, if you didn't even serve yourself that are veterans or former or current military members, happy Veterans Day to everybody. It's a great day to be American. It's always a great day to be an American. But it's even more special today. What's today's date? Here we are, November 11th, 2019. Which means it's always great to be an American, but especially when you have college football. You know, out of all the sports in the world, college football reigns supreme in the United States of America. Why? Well, look at all the other sports. You got soccer. You got, well, baseball is pretty American too, but that's been extremely popular in both Europe and Asia and everywhere else around the world. Certainly south of the border and all of Latin America, very, very popular sport. But in the United States of America, college football reigns supreme. It's about as American as it gets. 150 years of college football we're celebrating this year. And what a great time to be an American on Veterans Day. Listen, again, thank you all for your service. If you have served in the past or you're currently serving, you guys are amazing and fantastic. So with that out of the way, let's get into the meat of the video here. Last week, we had our very first college football playoff committee rankings. We got rid of that stupid-ass AP poll rankings that everyone was yapping about all year. When I was sitting back telling you guys it was meaningless, and everyone was saying, oh, no, it's not meaningless. It does mean so. You beat ranked teams. You didn't beat a ranked team. Blah, 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 blah. Nobody's talking about the AP anymore, are they? Nope. You don't want to know why? Because it doesn't matter. You won't hear anybody talk about the AP poll until next August. So, yeah, bye-bye meaningless AP poll. Thank you for nothing. Anyway, so last week, we had our first college football playoff rankings come out, and I'm going to do my best today. I'm going to do my best. Probably won't be good enough, but it'll still be my best to project what they're going to do in the top 10 this week. So what did we see last week, though? We saw a lot of chaos. We already knew that either Alabama or LSU was going to lose because they played each other and they were both in the top four. Well, LSU goes in and puts on an extremely impressive performance in Tuscaloosa against the Tide and beats them at home. And of course, Joe Burrow, played out of his mind, and he looks like the clear Heisman front runner right now. So you got to give it to the LSU Tigers. Congratulations on the big win. And congratulations on most likely moving up to number one in the polls this week. We'll talk about that in a minute. Or not the polls, but the rankings, whatever. All right, so also Minnesota. The Golden Gophers and the Fighting Row Your Boaters host number 4 Penn State and beat the brakes off them. I know, all you Penn State fans are going to get mad at me. Look, it's not personal. I even said I understood why Penn State was ranked ahead of Clemson in the first poll. I said I understood it. If they're looking at, their undefeated records and one's got a better resume than the other, then if that's how you're looking at it, you got to put Penn State ahead of them. But let's be real. Minnesota beat the brakes off you. I don't care what the score says. I don't care what it says. I watched the whole game, every single snap, and Minnesota beat the brakes off of Penn State. I consider that a great win for Minnesota and it's a quote-unquote good loss for Penn State, if that's what you want to call it, because I think Minnesota was vastly underrated. That being said, I think Minnesota should, forget, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's just go ahead and put up on the screen right here, right now, what I project the rankings to be this week, and I'll go by one through each one of these teams and tell you why I feel like this is where they're going to be. Okay? There you go. College football rankings, edition 2. Last week, I think Oklahoma was at 9 in the rankings. Now, I want to say this before I start. Again, these are my projections, not my personal feelings on how this should be. That's number one. So keep that in mind when you listen to what I'm about to tell you. And what I'm about to tell you is Baylor belongs in the top 10. They're 9-0. They're undefeated in the Big 12. The fact that they were even ranked behind Oklahoma last week to begin with is ridiculous. But they were, and they probably still will be this week. So both these teams, Oklahoma and Baylor, had struggle wins. So I just don't see a scenario at this point where Baylor's going to jump ahead of Oklahoma in the rankings, even though they should be ranked ahead of them. In the same conference, one has a loss, one doesn't. Same spiel I gave you last week. Okay? So I think Oklahoma just is going to drop from 9 to 10 because of some of the teams ahead of them that won, and also because they had a struggle win themselves. So Oklahoma, if they're lucky, they'll come in at 10. Same thing with Utah. Last week, Utah was at 8 in the playoff rankings. I think they'll drop to 9 because of some of the teams ahead of them. Pretty much the only reason, okay? Penn State at 8. Now, I toyed with would they drop Penn State to 9 or 10, but I think when you look at these rankings here that I have projected, Oklahoma and Utah do not have as good of wins as Penn State, and they all have one loss. So I think they'll keep Penn State ahead of Utah and Oklahoma at this point. That's my reasoning for that. Minnesota. If you're a Golden Gopher fan, first of all, you got to be extremely happy. And it's very impressive what they've done this year and what they did on Saturday against Penn State. Very impressive. But you've got to still feel disrespected that you were at 17. And who was on here last week? In my personal opinion rankings, I had Minnesota at 10 last week. 10. They had you at 17. Talk about the disrespect. Like I said, when does winning not matter in college football anymore? What a shame. These guys got to eat their crow, this playoff committee. They should be ashamed of themselves for having Minnesota at 17 last week. Shame on you, playoff committee. So, I mean, so what do they do now? I mean, I've heard people say that Minnesota can move up to 4. And if you want to know my personal opinion, Minnesota should be at 4. Put Minnesota at 4. Stop pissing in our face and telling us it's rain, playoff committee. Shame on you. But they won't do that because they already made their bed. Now they got to lay in it. So I think if you're a Minnesota Golden Gopher, it doesn't matter whether you're ranked 7 or 4 right now because you're going to have to win out to get in the playoffs anyway. But it still would piss me off. And I think the best that they could possibly move up to this week is 7 or maybe 6, but I think probably 7. Maybe 6, though. We'll see. Because they can't really, if they move them up to 4, then they've got to really eat crow on that and say, well, we completely misjudged Minnesota and screwed up last week. And if you screwed up on that team, how many other teams did you screw up on? Playoff committee? Tell us. We need to know. And before I go any further here, I'm getting all juiced up. I'm getting all amped up here on this fine Monday Veterans Day afternoon. Why is there no transparency in this playoff committee? How come there's not allowed to be cameras in there when they're discussing where teams should be? What do you got to hide, playoff committee? Put some cameras in there. Hell, it's 2019. There's cameras everywhere. You can't walk out your front door without being recorded. Everybody's taping you. All the time. Why aren't we taping these jack-offs? Somebody tell me that. What you got to hide? We want to hear what you're saying. Why is it such a big secret? Anyway. I think they'll have Minnesota at 7. I think they'll have Oregon at number 6 because they won again. And I think they were at 7 last week. The debate between Alabama and Georgia is a very fascinating one. Very fascinating. And I don't know how this is going to work out. I'm putting Alabama at 5 and Georgia at 4, but it certainly could be the other way around, right? Because what are they valuing? Are they valuing how bad your loss is or how good your loss is or how good of wins you've had? And the bottom line here is, I mean, Alabama fans don't want to hear this. I mean, look, here's my personal opinion. If you put Alabama and Georgia on a field tomorrow, I think Alabama would beat Georgia. That's just my personal opinion. So if it were me, I'd probably have Alabama 4, Georgia 5. But the bottom line here is that Georgia, based on their schedule, has a better win against Florida. There's no team on Alabama's schedule that's as good as Florida so far that they've beaten. They played one really good team in LSU, a great team, and they lost to them at home. So I don't know. Look, it's an interesting debate whether they value losses or wins more. I don't know. They'll change their mind from week to week, won't they? So we'll figure it out. But in my projections, I think they're going to have Bama 5, Georgia 4. I think Clemson moves up to 3 with a dominant win over a crappy team. I sound like a broken record when I say that. Every win that Clemson has is a dominant win over a crappy team. But hey, is that Clemson's fault? No, not their fault. And also, 2 teams ahead of them lost. So I think they move up to 3. Ohio State was number 1 last week. Now, this is an interesting debate here, too. If you think that Ohio State was the best team in the country before last week, and they went out and went 70-something to what? I mean, I don't know. They won by 70 points like they always do. How do you really drop them behind LSU? I understand. And that's why I have LSU 1 in my predictions here. Because I think that LSU's got the best resume. But here's the problem. And I've been saying this and I'll continue to say this. What is the playoff committee value more? How you look or who you play? Because last week, the very first rankings that they did, they claimed, we know that LSU has a better resume, but we think Ohio State's better. That's why we put them there. So has anything changed between last week and this week that makes you think Ohio State's not better than LSU? That hasn't changed my mind. 2 great teams. That's it. But if you had Ohio State 1 last week, you should still have them number 1. They haven't done anything to lose that spot. But I think that they will because of LSU's resume. And if they do put LSU 1, which is fine with most people that have watched football this year, I mean, it's like splitting hairs between these 2 teams. Hell, to me, it's even splitting hairs between these top 3 teams. You could put Clemson right in that mix too, but they ain't played nobody, right? They ain't played nobody. They only beat everybody by 40-plus points. But anyway, don't get me even started on that. But if you had them ranked number 1, doesn't matter. I think everybody would agree with that, and it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. So there you guys have it. My projections for this week is that Oklahoma will be 10, Utah 9, Penn State 8, Minnesota 7, Oregon 6, Alabama 5, Georgia 4, Clemson, Tigers 3, Ohio State Sucknuts 2, and the LSU Corn Dogs numero uno. I think I've said it all, and I've said nothing all at the same time. And that's usually how this goes. Have a great day. Have a great Veterans Day. I'll see you guys tomorrow night, if I'm lucky. Not if you're lucky. You're never lucky to see me, but I might be lucky enough to do a live broadcast for you during the rankings. Have a great day. Pigskin Pete is checking out.